one of the besetting sins, if you like, of the European Union has been, in a sense, a competitive attitude, particularly on the part of France and Germany, towards the city. In other words, the city is competing, and more than competing, with Frankfurt and Paris. And so there's always been that kind of jealousy of the city and a failure to recognize that it is actually a huge asset for the European Union as a whole. Now, having Jonathan Hill as an experienced British politician and somebody who's been in business actually running that bit of the Commission, I think will deal with that problem. That said, he is, of course, the Commissioner for the whole of the European Union, and he has to look out for the interests of the Eurozone countries. And he can't just look out for British interests. But he will obviously be conscious of British interests, and I think he'll make a real point of understanding, insofar as he doesn't already, how the city works. So I think it's a very important job, and it's very good that a British person has got it. And I think it must be good for our interests. But it's not a complete safeguard of British interests. That has to be the efforts of the British government to safeguard that aspect of British policy. I mean, I think the issue of whether the new structure will work more effectively in the Commission and whether it will respond to British needs is very much an unanswered question. It's a new structure. For the first time, you have clusters of groupings of European commissioners under vice presidents, but with the vice presidents being the sort of doorway to approval by the Commission as a whole, but not actually having executive authority over the commissioners who in theory are answerable to them. So it's an experiment. I mean, it's a worthy experiment. It's designed to try and bring some organization and to try and take account of the fact that there are quite a lot of overlapping responsibilities. But alongside it, there's also going to be a very large reorganization of the Directorates General, i.e. of the civil service, if you like, of the Commission. So I think we're probably headed for quite a few months, at least, of uncertainty about whether it's going to work as it's intended. I certainly think some reform is desirable and some reform is achievable. From my perspective, a lot of the reform that's needed is positive. In other words, things that haven't been done that should be done. Completion of the single market is an obvious one. A coherent energy policy, trade agreement with the United States, continued focus on environment policy. All those things, digital single market, and those are priorities for the Juncker Commission. Some of those chime in with the British government's views, but there are also certain things that David Cameron wants to claw back, and one of those relates to immigration. I don't think there's a realistic prospect of changing the freedom of movement rules. There is a more realistic prospect of getting agreement on some changes in the way the benefit system operates. For example, now, if you reside in the UK, I think it's for 2 years, then your family in X or Y country elsewhere in the EU can get social benefits. Now, that is potentially anomalous, and that may be subject to some revision. Equally, the Working Time Directive isn't going to disappear, and indeed, even if we were outside the European Union, we're not going to have a free-for-all on working time in our own country. But you might get some change on the thresholds at which, i.e. the size of company at which the Working Time Directive applies. But for all these things, David Cameron is going to need allies. And at the end of the day, if there is a referendum in this country, my guess is that all of us, when we go to the ballot box, will be taking a decision not so much about this or that change, but about whether we think it is in the UK interest to remain a member of the European Union, warts and all.